Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Enlightenment Through Understanding with your host, Jacob Strom. How's everybody doing today? Is everybody doing good? Well, that's good. Glad to hear it. So, today I have been a little sidetracked, so I haven't been getting too many podcasts out there, and I do apologize to y'all for not getting as much out there as I need to. Um, just been a little distracted. Had a lot going on. But anyways, um, what I wanted to discuss today is the Pareto principle and how that applies to society as a whole today, but also um, how it is interpreted and what it really means. Um, because I don't think that um, whether it's a business relationship or an acquaintance relationship or a marriage type relationship, I don't think people understand even something that that wouldn't be applied typically toward a marriage or spousal relationship could be interpreted from a business relationship, and I don't think that people as a whole are taking this serious enough and also understanding it enough. So Vilfredo Pareto first observed this in land ownership. Some of y'all might have heard it referred to as the 80-20 principle. Um, I hope y'all can hear me. I just realized that the connection is not very good with my Wi-Fi today for some reason. I'm not sure why. um, Let me just address that real quick and see. I do apologize for this, y'all. It's not saying why. Hopefully y'all can hear it. But anyways, so the 80-20 um, principle comes from this, and it can be interpreted multiple different ways. But um, if you put 20% of effort into something, you'll get 80 back. Or if you put 80% of effort, then you'll get 20 back. And how that's interpreted in business is when you have 10 employees, three of those 10 employees will do 50% of the work. It's an interesting concept. Why wouldn't it be, five of them doing 50% of the work? He further went on to say that number diminishes as the number increases of employees. Say you have 100 employees. Now 10 of them will do 50% of the work. That number is actually getting lower. But it's even crazier. To more into his observation, he then took an employer with 1,000 employees, and only 100 of those employees contributed to a total of 50% of the work being accomplished. So again, that number is continuing to diminish the more employees that we have. What happens when we have a CEO or an owner who is in that 80% bracket? This is where it gets interesting. This is my own observation through life experience, and I will be relating a previous employer, which will remain nameless, um, as an example of what you can see begins to happen. Even the Pareto principle, he notes that if you have a good CEO or if you have a good leader that is a part of that 20%, then he will focus his attention to the 20% that is doing the most, that is contributing the most. And so, sorry about that. Somebody's dog just ran over in front of my house here. So anyway, so with that being said, his business will grow exponentially to the point of having those 1,000 employees, even though only 100 are working and are doing 50% of that business. And so if he is a part of that 20%, then that 20% is staying because he is focused on them, their needs, their specific um, um, job, their specific characteristics. Now I'm going to use an example of my previous employer, okay? One of my previous employers refused to buy a whole hog till I had to threaten him with turning him into the, labor board. And the reason that he refused is because he didn't want to acknowledge that I was using the wrong tool to the point that it was hurting my wrists extremely bad. Now, I fell in that 20% category. I was doing more work and I was doing work faster, getting more work done. And the other employee said that as well. And so with that being said, he wasn't focused on the 20%, he was focused on the 80%. He was focused on the the trivial many as opposed to the the few, the vital few. And when you look at this, that employee then doesn't want to stick around. That employee is getting hurt on the job because he's not provided, or they, shouldn't say he, but they are not provided with the necessary tools to further their job, to further advance their career. And so they don't stick around. So then they leave, right? So now, from a company aspect, that company is not going to be around, right? It's not going to be around for much longer. And that's true. It will continue to go through employees. It will continue. That doesn't mean that the company won't stick around. However, it certainly will not keep employees. This also applies to relationships. And this is what's interesting, this interesting dynamic. Again, speaking from a previous relationship, but also from observing other relationships, you often hear, you know, well, my parents don't like him, or my parents don't like her, or whatever. So they're focusing on what the rest of the family thinks about their spouse as opposed to what they think about their spouse and supporting their spouse. And of course, my previous relationship, the big hang up with her parents, my ex-wife's parents, was the fact that I was younger than her. I was almost 11 years younger than her. And so, on top of her being a narcissist, she then also had to deal with her parents not approving the relationship because I was so much younger than her, right? So again, she's focused on the many, the the trivial many, her parents, what other people thought, as opposed to the one person who should have mattered the vital few in her relationship. And so this affects the entire outcome of of not only the dynamics within our relationship, but it affects um, everything. You will only get 20% out of that relationship, not 100. And so 20% satisfaction, 20% happiness, 20%, the list goes on of what you will get out of that relationship, right? So now we can kind of understand that, energy is exchanged between people, day and night, all the time. And so if you're not reciprocating that energy in some form or another, then you have to go and get it from somewhere else, as opposed to where you should be getting it from, right? And and so this leads to a lack of overall satisfaction in your life. And of course, there's all these memes that you can find on LinkedIn and Facebook, and all these cartoons showing the difference between a boss and a leader. A boss sits in his carriage and points, says, go, and a leader is out front, of the crew, pulling the cart with the crew. So we understand that there is visual dynamics for understanding this 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 perspective. However, it's important to note that this exchange of energy, this exchange of what gets done, is generally from Pareto's observations, it's always 80-20. And so that's kind of interesting because if you're putting 80% into something, you're only getting 20% out. But if you're putting 20% of something, then you're getting 80% out. That almost seems like a conundrum, almost seems like confusion, because those are opposite statements, yet it's a continuing circle, right? So, so how do you interpret that then? Because from the layman, it sounds like you just contradicted yourself. And because this planet is all energy, it's all, an exchange of energy. It's the best way I can describe it. What that means is if you put 20% into that 20% of the population of the people what we're using in employment as a business platform to describe this. This portion of it would not work on a relationship. You'd have to use a different a different analogy. But if you can visualize this, if you have a boss that is among that 20%, so he would actually be a leader or she would actually be a leader, um, if they were among that 20% and they take notice and put 20% effort into that 20% population, then they would see an 80% outcome. And that's pretty interesting that that would work that way, because you really see it when you start understanding business. You really see it when you start comparing different bosses, CEOs together. You start realizing that they are that when you have a bad boss or bad CEO, they're putting 80% effort into appeasing the 80%, right? So when you look at the corporate world, then they do, X amount of, paid time off, X amount of, right? They're trying to appease the entire 100% of their workforce. Let's do, pizzas once a month. Let's do all these little things which are big to the corporate world. They cost them bigger because they've got paid time off, paid health, paid, but they're also rewarding that 80% that is doing less than their share of the work, right? So that 20% who is not getting their individual needs met will find another employer, whether they are as good or not. They will find another employer to go to, right? And so that's their failure. That's the corporate America's failure to address and recognize that 20% that does the most work. And also, like I say, it applies in a relationship as well. If you're trying to appease your family, as opposed to the one person, that 20% is not going to work, right? Because that exchange of energy is off balance, even though it's already off balance because it's 80-20 from Pareto's observations. And this is a well-known observation that he did and study that he did, right? And of course he did it with real estate. He did it with with observing real estate, observing the workers of the real estate, all that stuff. But regardless, business applies across the board. It doesn't matter what kind of business it is. An exchange of energy is, in fact, across the board a universal language. So we can see how that would affect every aspect of life. Yeah. So by prioritizing effort toward the vital few, if you're in business, since that's predominantly what brought this conversation up, a friend of mine asked me the other day how I was so successful when I had my business, and and of course I explained that to him. I've known about the Pareto observation for many years, and so that's how you applied it toward your, toward your own business. Any successful business person or individual, successful individual, whether they're in business or life skills in general, they recognize this stuff, and they recognize that there is, that there is information to be had from it. So yeah, so that's where that's at. If y'all want, y'all can Google it. It's Vilfredo Pareto, and it's pretty well known. Like I say, observation study that this guy did, and I think everyone should take a page from it and recognize the crucialness, the absolute um, um, information that can be gained from these types of studies and how they apply in our daily lives. I think it makes for better humans when we do acknowledge this stuff. And it's a humanitarian effort, right? It shouldn't be about us and as an individual. It should be about us as a whole, about about humanity, and about society. And of course, we're losing that. The farther down the rabbit hole that we're going in society, we're losing that ability um, to gain information through understanding of the human psychology of um, what energy has to be done, and what a person underlining thinks, and how we operate. Because again, we are an exchange of energy. Society is, to turn on your computer requires electricity. It requires something outside of it, right? That goes with everything in life. And so you have to understand that everything around you um, has to be understood thoroughly in order to get to the bottom of why things are shifting, why there's misunderstanding, um, and that sort of stuff. So at any rate, um, I hope that this helps to answer some of y'all's questions. I hope it also um, is gaining to where you can gain something, whether it's your personal life or business life or whatever it is. So yeah, so with that being said, I'm going to sign off today, and y'all have a wonderful day. Happy new Gregorian calendar year for those of you who follow the Gregorian calendar. It officially hit 6 days ago or thereabouts. For us who do not follow that, we know that the new year is not here yet. So at any rate, all right. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll catch you all next time. Thank you.